So welcome everybody to the Rising Tide Foundation Sunday lecture. Um, if you're thinking that I'm kind of in disguise, Matt in disguise, that is not so. He was not able to be here today. And Cynthia and he sent their regrets and also wanted to greet everybody. So Gerald and I, Jerry, my husband, and I will host this session. Hopefully we do a good job. And PD is here, and PD Lawton is here with us today. You're in Australia, right, PD?
No, I'm in the UK.
You're in the UK. Okay. For
Yeah,
some
not
reason
far from Plymouth.
Okay. Okay. So PD Lawton is our lecturer today, and she is the editor-in-chief of African Agenda, A New Perspective on Africa. And you can read it at africacanagenda.net. africacanagenda.net, all written together. So PD is going to give us a presentation on high-speed railroads and hieroglyphics. Now, some of you will probably go like, what? High-speed railway race and hieroglyphics. How does that fit together? But she assures me that this is connected. And we will look at some incredibly important deep history and a look at some extremely positive pathways to a new renaissance for Africa. So with that, I hand it over to PD Lawton. Thank you, PD.
Thank you so much,
Welcome.
Magdalena. Thank you, Jerry. Shall I share screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. I'd like to start off just by thanking the Rising Tide Foundation, Matt and Cynthia, and you, Magdalena and Jerry, for covering for them today. And to mention that I feel deep gratitude towards the Rising Tide Foundation for the empowering knowledge that they are giving us every week, this relentless flood of empowering knowledge, which I deeply appreciate. And especially in these particular times that we're living through in the world. So my talk today, as Magdalena said, is covering two topics seemingly unrelated. The first being a high-speed railway, a continental high-speed railway for Africa, for the African continent. And after that will come a brief segment on hieroglyphics. And then I'm sure it'll become apparent to you why the two are actually related. So given the times we're living in, what's happening in so much of the world, in particular Gaza, I just wanted to put a little bit of soul food to start off the talk. And I've written here that the concentration of unity of purpose, interdependence. In South Africa, there's a term for that. It's Ubuntu, which basically means the brotherhood of man, something I think we definitely all need to work towards. Now, there's a Zulu, isiZulu proverb saying, and that is umuntu, ingumuntu, ingabantu. And that's the language of the Zulu people of KwaZulu-Natal, which is a province in South Africa. It's a very ancient language, incredibly beautiful, incredibly profound, quite astonishing. So that is that saying. And that saying means a person is a person because of others. In other words, I am because you are. That's very profound, I think. So I just say it again. You say, umuntu, ingumuntu, ingabantu. Now the Khoisan of the Kalahari, also in South Africa, the desert, the Kalahari Desert, have in a way a similar saying, one that I also find very, very beautiful. And they say that you are a dream, I am dreaming, which is very strange and very profound. So with a bit more soul food, coming from my very favorite South African, Robert Sobukwe, who was the founder of the Pan-African Congress of South Africa, way back in the late 1940s. And he said many, many very beautiful things, one of them being, sorry, my next slide is not playing. Here we go. So Robert Sobukwe said, the Africanists take the view that there's only one race to which we all belong, and that is the human race. In our vocabulary, therefore, the word race, Abantu, as applied to man, has no plural form. He said, here is a true rooted in African soil, nourished with waters from the rivers of Africa. Come and sit under its shade and become with us the leaves of the same branch and the branches of the same tree. He said that in a speech at Fort Hare in South Africa in 1949. So about the brotherhood of man and that there being only one race, it's a lesson that needs learning for many in Israel, and a lesson that needs learning for many in Rwanda, Central Africa, where we have a situation very little talked about. It is actually of note that it's 30 years recently, the commemoration of the events that took place in Rwanda in 1994. I'm sure many of you will remember. It's 30 years since that happened. And if you go to my website, which, as Magdalena said, is africanagenda.net, you will find a number of articles, a number of interviews. Covert Action magazine have recently done a very good article that's on my website as well, and interviews with a journalist called Keith Harmon Snow, who is the primary source of documentation of what actually happened in Rwanda in 1994, the history before then of the region, and the subsequent horrors. So I strongly recommend people do go to my website and they'll find those the links to it there. So on to today's subject. We have a picture here. Okay, so this picture, apparently it's from Mozambique. This little girl here is getting some muddy water out of a cave to drink and put it in her plastic bucket. And I actually have an even better picture here. It's far too small for you to see, but it's on the back of a spring water bottle from a well-known supermarket here in the UK. And the picture is of an African child, little guy, probably about 4 or 5 years old, dressed in extremely ragged clothes. And he's trying to get the last drip of water out of a rusty iron pipe. So that's fantastic advertising, isn't it? And in buying this bottle of spring water, I have donated 3 pence to the One Foundation. So the whole thing is so interestingly connected, isn't it? The One Foundation is the organization that manufactured Greta Thunberg and the entire green energy revolution, which Greta Thunberg's father worked for Havas, which is a very large French advertising company. So they've used Greta Thunberg to market their latest speculative bubble. Right, so USAID have got a new thing going in Africa, particularly in Mozambique, I hear. And USAID want to invest in small enterprises. So in many African countries, you have micro, you have small, and then you have medium. You have different categories of businesses, going from somebody buying a barrel of peanut oil and dividing it into liters and selling that on the street, going up to the level of medium-sized enterprise. But anyway, USAID have now got a big thing going to invest in small enterprises. And I wonder if I could just throw it out to your listeners. Anyone want to hazard a guess as to why USAID would want to invest in small enterprises in countries like Mozambique? Anyone want to guess at that?
Well, they want to keep it small. They don't want to have large corporations, I guess, or successful entrepreneurship among the population there.
Yeah.
It's easier to control.
Well, you said it exactly. They want to invest in small enterprises primarily because those enterprises are small. So that is a Malthusian mindset, wanting to keep things small, which is why I talk about high-speed railways on the African continent. It's the opposite of small. So I always thought somehow that it was self-explanatory, the work I do on my website, but apparently it's not quite as I thought. The reason that so much of our work concentrates on nuclear energy and on very large infrastructure projects like the high-speed railway is because development is the enemy of neocolonialism. And that's why I do it. That's what fascinates me. That's why I'm so incredibly passionate about this railway, because I want to see the end of poverty. I want to see the end of things like that on the water bottle, some little guy drinking out of a rusty pipe, and us in this world thinking, oh yeah, that's okay, we'll give 3p to the One Foundation. Those days have got to go. So development is the enemy of colonialism. Development is the enemy of all of that that's been and that is still going on. There cannot be sovereignty of the nation state without economic development. And a colleague of mine and a great friend of the Rising Tide Foundation, Lawrence Freeman, has recently written a very good article on that exact subject in regards to the Horn of Africa and Ethiopia. So you cannot have what we like to call democracy. You cannot have a strong nation state without economic development, which is one of the main reasons that the Malthusian mindset wants to keep Africa unindustrialized as much as possible for as long as possible. Excuse me. So along with that comes energy independence, one of the reasons why I promote nuclear energy, and food independence. So we come now to this gargantuan project. It's absolutely huge when you realize the size of the African continent, 25% of the Earth's land surface, Africa. And this is, the acronym is AIHSRN, which is the African Integrated, really key word, integrated high-speed railway network. And I've written an article recently on it called the Unity of Purpose for African Economic Integration. And you'll find that again on my website on the menu page. It's one of the key articles, and you can read it there. So here's a map of the thing. It's absolutely fantastic. So you have a series of corridors. So you have these three main corridors coming down north-south. Then you have a very interesting one going around the entire continent. And then you have a series of east-west corridors. And the primary purpose of this gargantuan railway network is to connect all major cities and all regions, so that you have this integrated, connected logistics transport system. And it doesn't take, a smart person to realize the transformative effect this will have on all of the African economies. Absolutely incredible. And I must just say that, plenty of countries, in fact, I was trying to think how many countries in Africa don't have existing railway networks. I know Rwanda doesn't and Burundi doesn't. These are countries in Central Africa. Almost every other country has a railway system, but the railway systems are in varying different states. You have South Africa, has a very modern railway system and covers most of the country. You have a lot happening in Egypt, has been there for quite some time, and in other countries. But much of it has been designed to extract resources, so that you'll have a train line going from a mining area out to the coastline or to wherever it's going to link for export. You don't have a railway, and many of the railways are dilapidated. I know Mali, they have an incredibly dilapidated railway system because of this complete destruction of the physical economy of so much of Africa. So there has been complete neglect, as we have in the West. We have the same complete neglect of the physical economy. And that is played out in Africa through IMF loans, which go to projects other than transformative infrastructure that builds the physical economy. So anyway, just having another little look at the map, can you imagine getting on a train in Dakar in Senegal and being able to disembark on the other side of the continent in Djibouti? What a joy that would be, how absolutely amazing. And I particularly love the idea of the connectedness. So when obviously we're talking freight, we're talking trade, we're talking all sorts of things like that. Freight being the primary payer of the railway systems. Passengers kind of hang off the back of freight. Passenger networks are not really that profitable, but the freight is. But as things are at the moment, transport throughout the continent is inordinately expensive. It's actually cheaper to fly from London to Kigali in Rwanda or Bujumbura in Burundi. You can do that for £400, $450, say. It's cheaper to do that than it is to fly a relatively short distance across the Democratic Republic of Congo. The ticket will cost you more. So that's how shockingly absurd it is. And it's the reason that the connectedness of populations, it's very, very difficult for people living up in Mali to just hop on a train and go and visit family or friends or take a holiday in Tanzania. This is impossible. So the nature of this railway is going to transform populations, nations' lives. This is really going to connect people from areas throughout the continent in a way that has never, ever been possible for the average person. Okay, so getting down to some of the nitty-gritty of it, this is a project devised in 2013. It's the African Union. They have designed this project. And one of the key things, it's the importance of standardized, they're using SGR, standard gauge rail. So the entire system is the same. So you can have a locomotive go from one line to another, and it's the same track, it's the same signaling. You have a standardized railway network. Now we're talking high speed, and high speed they say is about 200 kilometers an hour, but it depends on various different things. Now, high speed requires electrification, so you can't achieve high speeds with diesel. So electrification is super important and critical to the whole conversation about this integrated network. Last thing I want to say on that before we move on from the map is that word integrated, because every section of this network joins country to country. So the whole thing is designed to go from one country to the next country. So that is the absolute beauty of it, and really the most important thing. Now, the railway is in effect the veins of trade. 2021, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement area, either known as agreement or area, was inaugurated. So this will be the world's largest free trading system. Very, very interesting. Long way to go with it. But without the railway network, the Continental Free Trade Agreement is just talk. You have to have this railway system in place to make that work. Just coming back on the word integrated, and I picked up on one of Juan Le's RTF, Rising Tide Foundation talks, that integrated, the Latin root means to make whole. And I thought that was so applicable, perfectly applicable for this railway system, because it will make Africa whole. It will unite Africa, will unite all those countries. It will make them whole. So yeah, transport, ridiculously expensive, really, really ridiculously expensive. And that, of course, plays out on everything. So you are trying to get your goods from, let's just say, Democratic Republic of Congo, and you are transporting them via Zambia or via Tanzania, and they're going on trucks. Well, the trucks are using diesel, they're using fuel. The roads are, in many cases, in a terrible state of repair, or in the rainy season, it's mud. So everything is reflected down, so that the cost of transport by road is so much dearer than it is by moving freight on rail. We know that one. It's obvious. So the longer Africa has an intensely severe, countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, the most the greatest infrastructure deficit that there is. And the longer this situation persists, the longer you have, you cannot have the ability to decrease poverty, to remove poverty, and to raise the standard of living. So infrastructure is so absolutely important. Now, I won't go into this in particular, but this phrase, "a luta continua," means the struggle continues, and it's the struggle for a just world. So any attempt that has been made since independence in the late 50s and the 1960s, any attempt at industrialization throughout the continent is routinely stumped upon by the jackboot of imperialism. And I'm thinking most recently of what has happened in Ethiopia, which has been very well covered by Lawrence Freeman on his website, Africa and the World. So industrialization, development has to be fought for. It has to be fought for tooth and nail. And that is a reality, that is a fact. Now people will say, talking about money and the cost of things, well, they seem to have stopped now, because it's been disproven. But for a number of years, we had this constant refrain about a debt trap, China's debt trap in Africa, you know, building a high-speed railway or a nuclear power plant or doing something major, some kind of major bridge, any meaningful infrastructure, roads, whatever. And always there's the story of a debt trap. Now, there's a right, a fundamental human right, and that fundamental human right is the right to development. It's so important. Now, this debt trap narrative, it doesn't make sense, because you can imagine, your average person can imagine the transformative effect things such as the high-speed railway would have on the continent, on all the economies. And the effect is primarily qualitative. It's not quantitative. You can't add it up, you know, and come out with a figure and say, they're going to have to repay all that. Because as we have learned, Matt's lectures on the subject have been so enlightening, that you transform an economy. You pay X amount this year for implementing your infrastructure, your mega infrastructure. In 20 years' time, what are you looking at? You are looking at a transformed economy. And this is how economists, Harvard economists, refuse to think. They have to stay in the present. They have to have this idea of sustainability. So there's always money for war and never money for infrastructure. The money for war is valueless. Where does it go? It's valueless money. But credit extended for the physical economy is value. And that whole issue that Matt has covered, and Lawrence Freeman as well, that money versus credit, such an important concept, economic concept. So by building that railway, by building the physical economy, you actually turn that into real value. So at the moment in the world, we have 3 Hitlers drowning in cash. I just have to say that, because there is always money for war. And I'm thinking of Israel, Ukraine, and the one that always gets left out is Rwanda. And we have 3 leaders who are the, what do we call them? The creations of the bankers of Wall Street and the City of London. And they most certainly are their creations. And they are doing so well in destroying so many lives. But just a quick point on Rwanda, that the latest thing is for the UK they have signed an immigration bill, an asylum processing center in Rwanda. So people coming to the UK will be flown by aeroplane several thousand kilometers to a country in the middle of Central Africa. And they say that this is a deterrent to stop the incredibly large number of people trying to cross the channel in dinghies and coming across to the UK, looking basically for the most part for a better life, to escape poverty from wherever they're coming from. And really, that whole narrative is nonsense, absolute nonsense. And it's a way of funneling cash to the ailing regime of Paul Kagame in Rwanda. Anyway, we'll get back to the railway. So I just want to bring in something here that Jeffrey Sachs actually gave the most astonishingly fantastic talk to the African Union about, I think it was January 23, in which he laid it out so well. He made so many incredibly good points. And if you go to my website, just go to africanagenda.net, type Jeffrey Sachs into the search bar, and you'll come up. I transcribed his talk. Luckily I did, because the video seems to have disappeared. But you can read the transcript, and it really is such a positive, such an incredibly hopeful message that he is giving to this audience, this African Union meeting. And he said, you know, that China, what China has done in 40 years, Africa can do in 30. So China eliminated all dire poverty. I think that was 2022 that came out. They announced it. I think it was 22. And, you know, that was such a monumental thing, such a monumental achievement. Got virtually no coverage whatsoever in the West. China could do it in 40 years. Africa can do it in 30. Can you imagine the African continent transformed in 30 years? And what an incredible thing that'll do. He made the point, because he was saying so many good things, like that these times now that we're living in our, I wouldn't say emerging, I say we're already living in a multipolar world, are perfect for long-term rapid development. And he said so many other fantastic things, but I'll read that to you at a later date. It really is such a great speech that he gave, and I recommend people go and listen to that. So on the question of financing, because obviously things need paying for, I'd just like to point out a quick thing here. The ideas of an African Infrastructure Development Bank that have been put forward using Hamiltonian economics that Matt has talked about, and also Lawrence Freeman, and how America's industrial success was created by the policies of Alexander Hamilton. So that is a very important concept, and very much needed in the world today in terms of Africa and the West. So a couple of interesting points there. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. This is a vast undertaking, and this is in Ethiopia, again covered by Lawrence Freeman. This is self-funded by the Ethiopian government. Very, very interesting that. And the new Suez Canal that was completed in 2014 in Egypt, that was funded by the issuing of government bonds. Apparently it wasn't as successful as they hoped for. People are too impatient for the reward from buying their bonds. But these are all possible. You know, the building of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, to produce hydropower. Ethiopia is now selling energy to neighboring countries. That's just incredible. And that project, as gargantuan as it is, was self-funded by the Ethiopian government. Ethiopia is not a wealthy country, and they could do it. So, okay, getting back to the railway. So the whole idea of the railway is that each country is responsible for building its section. It's each section of the corridors, the networks that we saw on the map, are the responsibility of every different country to incorporate those sections, those corridors within their domestic railway networks. These are being modernized. All African countries are now modernizing their railway networks. It's such an incredibly interesting time in the rail industry. But the one country that is outperforming all and is just doing so incredibly brilliantly is Tanzania. For those of you who may not be familiar, Tanzania is on the eastern coast of Africa. It's a vast country and has a particularly good government. Current government and the previous government of John Magufuli, President Magufuli, absolutely adored by his people, and transformed the Tanzanian economy, renegotiated several large infrastructure projects, and has succeeded in putting this section, the Tanzanian section of the Continental Railway system, really beyond anybody else. I mean, Egypt are doing fantastic things. Ethiopia has done fantastic things. Kenya has one section and they're building more, has had a lot of flack for doing that. But Tanzania is really outperforming everybody. So just to put it into perspective, and I think this is probably a better map for you to be able to see. So Tanzania, this from here, from Dar es Salaam up to Mwanza, it's 2,000 kilometers. So Tanzania has 2,000 kilometers of railway, modernized, high-speed, electrified railway, which will be operational next year, by the way. So this section, Dar es Salaam, almost to halfway across Tanzania, is already nearly 100% completed. That'll be operational, and it is electrified, an electrified high-speed train. It's incredible. This is just such good and fantastic news. So to put it into perspective, Tanzania is almost twice the size of France. France is Western Europe's largest country, for those who don't know, and Tanzania is twice the size of France. So they will be doing what has never been done before, and that will be giving access to the landlocked countries, Rwanda, Burundi, Eastern Congo, where there's all that genocide, ongoing genocide and war at the moment because of the minerals in the Eastern Congo that are being plundered by Paul Kagame's Rwanda. So this railway will go to the landlocked countries, and this is going to have such an incredible effect on the economies. A very, very key, very, very important section of the entire system. That's it on the map behind me. I don't know how clear that is for your viewers. So many interesting things about how Tanzania have actually achieved such great successes. And they have got, the primary contractors are a Turkish company called Yapi Makezi and Portuguese Motor Engel. But I think Yapi Makezi, also the Chinese CCEC, they are also contractors, but I think one of the primary contractors is Yapi Makezi. And well, the reason that Tanzania have not gone with just one contractor, but gone with a number, is because they are finding that system works much better in terms of keeping your costing down. So you've got a lot of healthy competition on who's going to construct the segments. It's being built in segments. So whereas you can see that part is completed, there are other parts which are also being built simultaneously. So this section here, I'll read out in a minute how well they're doing on that. But there are other sections that are being built. They're being built in sections. It's not just straightforward railway line through the country. You have different geographical problems, challenges that you overcome. So it's very interesting that Tanzania have achieved the success levels that they have and how they have actually done it. So building in segments, very good idea, using different contractors to keep your pricing competitive is proving highly successful. I don't know how many people watching this realize that Africa does already have a high-speed train that travels at 320 kilometers an hour, and that train is called Albarak, and it's Moroccan, operated by the Moroccan Railway Authority. So that's pretty astonishing, isn't it? You don't get to hear about it much at all. So just wanted to bring in, so that train, Albarak, goes between Casablanca and Tangiers, a distance of 300 kilometers. So there are also, for that region, there are also some very, very interesting plans for an undersea tunnel to connect Africa to Europe. I love that idea. You know, you can look at the number of refugees, migrants who are dying on a daily basis trying to cross the Mediterranean. It is utterly horrific, and it is the crime of our times. How many people are drowning in the Med trying to get to Europe? Now you can solve that by building a tunnel, and people will laugh and say, oh yeah. But can you see the logic? Can you see the logic in the undertaking, you know, the monumental undertaking of building such a long undersea tunnel from Africa to Europe? And you will resolve that immigration issue because you are developing the economies in Africa. So that is the way to think. It really is. And, you know, it would make possible the journey from Rabat in Morocco to Madrid in Spain. You could do that in 6 hours. I don't know how long it takes now, but a hell of a lot longer than 6 hours. And you could go from Rabat in Morocco to Paris in 10 hours. So you get from Morocco to Paris in 10 hours. I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Wouldn't that be revolutionary? Wouldn't that just be amazing? And how many problems would be solved by with an engineering project like that? It'd just be brilliant. So getting back to Tanzania, there's a fantastic interview. Another point on why Tanzania has had such success is that they have a particularly good body overseeing the construction of the railways, and that's the Tanzania Railway Corporation. Very, very efficient, super efficient entity overseeing this. And they also have a particularly brilliant Director General, Masanji Kadagoza, and he is in a very interesting interview, not a long interview, but just great to hear what he's saying, with a YouTube channel, Railways Africa magazine. And you can listen to that interview. It's really worth listening to. I certainly found it very, very interesting. You will find that again. You'll find that on my website. You'll find it on that article I wrote, Unity of Purpose. So well worth listening to. Another one which I found extremely interesting, also interview performed by Philippa Dean of Railways Africa magazine, was an interview with Ibra Wahabu. And he's a senior program officer of the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. So that interview, unfortunately, has got a negative, and that is the fact that they are now talking about removing this term high speed. Now, it's very, very important that they don't, because that high speed aspect is critical. You look at what China has managed to achieve, and so much has been down to their high-speed railway network. It's very important that the African Union reassess their decision to do that. They're just trying to keep costs down, but really they shouldn't do that. They should go higher. They should go higher. But again, this is a really informative interview. You'll find that on my website, on that article. And one of the things that Ibra Wahab was talking about is the concept. So they are now, the African Union are now saying that they want to redefine the concept of a railway. So instead of seeing a railway just simply transport, logistics, freight, passengers, they are now saying, let's look at the railways as economic corridors. So you have at one end, you have an airport, the other end, you have a seaport, in the middle, you have special economic zones, you have a new city, you have a lovely energy plant, nuclear energy plant, perhaps some small modular reactors, which is the latest innovation in nuclear energy, South African invention, very, very brilliant concept. So he's talking about this reinvention of the railway lines, that they are going to say, okay, we don't just have a railway line, we now have an economic corridor, which is a fantastic concept, actually coming from the Belt and Road Initiative, because this is how the Chinese are seeing their great the Belt and Road Initiative, the economic corridors. And I saw an excellent interview with BRICS Sweden, Hussein Askari, who was discussing the concept being implemented in Egypt. One of the great takeaways from that interview was people who love to talk about overpopulation. Now, 95% of Egyptians live around Cairo. The rest is empty. And how many countries in Africa have got that same problem? You know, where's the overpopulation when you look at things like that? So they're doing that in Egypt. Egypt is doing some astonishing things in terms of economic development. So getting back to the Tanzanian line, the unlocking of the Great Lakes. It's very, very important. You know, you get rid of war, you get rid of extreme poverty, you get rid of terrorism, you get rid of those things with economic development. You have industrialized economies where people can get jobs, can get them productive employment, raise the standard of living. Now, I have to say, because it's so important, that the railway line goes from Tanzania. No, I haven't got that map. Going from Tanzania to Burundi and Rwanda. Now, this is already happening. So they have completed the procurement process. They have procured the investment. They're done the feasibility studies. This is really going fast. It's going very, very fast. That these railway lines will be built in the very near future. Those will then link. So you have a almost like a circle forming from Tanzania, one line going up to Kigali in Rwanda, and then going into Eastern Congo down to Goma, then meeting up on the southern part of it from Burundi to Bukavu, and then through Eastern Congo, through the entire Democratic Republic of Congo, and eventually to the other side of the continent, Pointe-Noire, Congo-Brazzaville. So you will have that entire corridor completed, going from East Africa to West Africa. So going from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania all the way across the continent to Pointe-Noire in Congo-Brazzaville on the Atlantic Ocean. So Indian Ocean here, Atlantic Ocean there. And just to put things into perspective, if you go from the westernmost point in Democratic Republic of Congo to the easternmost point in the Democratic Republic of Congo, that is the same as going from London to Moscow. It's vast. Ethiopia. So again, Ethiopia have done so fantastically well. this has been operational in service for quite a few years now. I think it was 2017 this was completed. And that's the very first time this electrified line goes from one country to another. So it went from Ethiopia to Djibouti, and that was the first for Africa. Very, very important. They've done so well. And in time, they'll be connecting to all of these other countries that so desperately need economic development. And just coming here, now this is the Kenyan, part of the Kenyan line on a viaduct here, the Nairobi to Mombasa. So that Mombasa's on the coast, Nairobi is the capital. And it used to take 10 hours. Now that journey takes 4. That's great news. Now, one of the big problems when they were building this line is it traverses the Tsavo National Park, very important wildlife reserve, much loved wildlife reserve in Kenya. And the environmentalists were up in arms that they were going to put a railway through it. And the Chinese built this particular section in Kenya, and they were told, no way, you can't go through Tsavo National Park. Nobody's going to let you do that, and the Chinese said, well, we have exactly the same problem we've come across in some of our wildlife areas in China. We know what to do. We've done it before. It's absolutely no problem at all. So what they did is they put the train up on the viaducts and they soundproofed them. So you'll see footage. I've seen it on various videos of wildlife standing under the bridge having a good old scratch on the columns, and the train shoots overhead and they don't even flinch because it's soundproofed. So, that is the way to think, isn't it? That you can overcome these problems by using technology, scientific ingenuity. Anything can be done, anything can be achieved. I'll just quickly show you these. So this is Nigeria's existing railway lines, and they have they are implementing, they have already built many key sections of their modernized master railway plan. And it will, you see how important it is when you think of the levels of poverty in many countries like Niger. Fantastic things happening in Niger, by the way. Most amazing military government in power. And they formed a tripartite alliance: Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. These are all 3 countries who've had coups, military coups, and they have military governments, and good for them. There are a lot of people in Africa are looking to them and the stance that they're taking against the West. And they are being aided in developing their economies. Russia are going to build a nuclear power plant for Burkina Faso, and they're changing things. They're going east instead of west. The West has really nothing to offer, nothing at all. And this is Nigeria's master railway plan. So as you can see, this is going to be fantastic, and it's going to link up to all the neighboring regions. So I just put in there, I was talking about the scale of things and why, particularly in terms of energy, that 900 million people in Africa have no access at all to electricity. The energy deficit is huge. So you think in terms of transport and everything. So look at the scale of this continent, and this here is China, this is India, Eastern Europe, Italy, America, France, Spain, Germany, Portugal. And it just puts it into perspective, doesn't it? How huge it is. And the importance of that is when you have policy inflicted on African countries, and I'm thinking of the green energy policies, that simple scale of the size of most African countries mean that Eurocentric energy policies are not going to work, just simply because of the geography. You know, people talk about hydro. Well, the geography of many countries is not applicable. You know, sub-Saharan Africa, and there are many droughts, and you have Ethiopia is different because you've got this lovely cleft where they've built Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. But you know, if you're building a dam and you haven't got the depth of water, and you're in a hot country, you lose so much water to evaporation. And then what happens when there's a drought? And there's currently a very, very severe drought again in Zimbabwe. So you know, there's the scale is very important. Okay, how long I've been talking for an hour now? Sorry. Okay, so just to say very, very quickly, Agenda 2063, this is the African Union's goalpost for the completion of the railway. And they call it Agenda 2063 because it would be 100 years since the organization of African Union, African Unity, not African Union, African Union, Unity was formed. So that is why it is called that. Now, the original OAU was formed by Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Nasser of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, Sékou Touré of Guinea, Modibo Keïta of Mali, and Ben Bella of Algeria all had very prominent roles to play. And they formed what was called the Casablanca Group. The Casablanca Group were the two key people were Kwame Nkrumah and Gamal Nasser, the greatest of the great minds back in the 1960s. And they pushed for rapid industrialization. That was their thing. We have to have rapid economic development, and we have to have it now. Not tomorrow, not in 10 years' time, not in 100 years' time, a century later, because those men were taken down one by one. Economies destroyed, their dreams destroyed, everything. So that idea of rapid industrialization, it was so important then, and it's so important now. And I think it was Jerry who brought up in a previous presentation I did that this idea of gradualism, you know, of doing things bit by bit, slowly, you know, that it was Martin Luther King who had that term, the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. You see, that's how they stopped. They talked many African leaders into not going for things rapidly. So the solution to that railway is not to build it and have it completed by 2063. Most people will be dead by then. It's a long time hence. And African youth, and the demographics of the continent, most people are under the age of 30. So they certainly can't wait until 2063, when most of the rolling stock will need replacing anyway. So there is a fast track proposal by Roland Atteguba, astonishing man in the railway industry, CEO of Bethlehem Railways, and he was assigned by the AU to come up with a fast track proposal, which he did, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's simple, it's completely doable. He says it can be done in 12 to 13 years. You don't have to wait 100 years, and we don't have until 2063. So you can access Roland Atteguba's fast track proposal on Lawrence Freeman's website and also on mine. And you can watch Roland Atteguba's presentation with Railways Africa magazine, and also in discussion with myself and Lawrence Freeman. So there's the information there. And that is all I have to say about the Continental Railway, the Integrated Continental Railway. I don't know if that's possibly a good moment to stop and
That's
then have anyone got anything they want to ask?
yes. So PD asked would like to do the presentation in two sections. So the hieroglyphs are coming right afterwards, which I'm really waiting for. Okay. Thank you so much, PD, for this wonderful presentation on the railways and development proposals in Africa. The slide number 25 with all these countries, European and Asian, all the other countries in the world fit into the continent of Africa. That's pretty mind-boggling.
It is.
Um, I had if anybody has a question, please post it in the chat box, and I will go um, by order of appearance of the questions and to see who comes first. Did you want to take the share screen down, PD Lawton, for the answer and question session?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
do that.
Just makes it a little bit easier. Okay. Because now I can see this chat. Okay. So, okay. Let me see. Uh, so Joseph had a comment. Joseph, did you want to give this comment yourself, or do you want me just read it from your chat box? You're by default, everybody's on mute, so you have to unmute yourself first. Joseph, are you there?
Yeah, hello?
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, you had a question about the immigration from the UK.
No, it wasn't a question, it was just a comment, really.
Okay.
More about the fact that the kind of illegal, if you like, migration is used as a distraction, really. But if you notice the link I sent, it's probably about maybe 1/20th of what the legal migration is, the people who are crossing in boats and stuff. But it's being used by the Conservative Party and the Labour to some extent as people, they're traditionally an anti-immigration party in quotes because they're not really, but they say they are. And in order to maintain this illusion, they highlight this thing about Rwanda, but it's just a distraction to get people who are anti-immigration to think they're doing something about it. But they're actually, they've been in charge for quite some time in this country, and immigration has gone up continually. Not saying whether immigration is a good or bad thing, but
Yeah.
it's we all may be aware that it's possibly being used to, for purposes other than strictly, from a point of view of a good heart, looking after people. It's being used maybe by other people as a way of eroding a sort of national culture or something, as a prelude to having, if you want to get rid of a sovereign nation, it's quite a good idea to bring in millions of people over a very short time. It creates a lot of tension. It's like what the powers that be have done in other countries. You create division, you give people a scapegoat to vent their anger. Yeah. So I'm not saying that migration helping people out is a bad thing, but this is being manipulated in order to create a distraction for people who like that. That was it, really.
Thanks, Joseph. I actually had a question about that because I wasn't quite up to date on what is happening with regarding the UK refugee policy, and I wasn't quite clear what you were saying. Are you saying that they're flying non-Africans to Rwanda? They're taking immigrants from other countries and they're flying them to Rwanda? Is that that's what I understood?
You're asking PD, I think.
PD, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you can ask Joseph. That's
Okay, or Joseph, either one of you.
Well, as far as I'm aware, nothing's really happened yet. As I say, it's kind of creates a lot of media energy. People are thinking about that all the time. I don't know if you noticed the link I sent from the BBC. and it was in 2022, there was like 750,000 people coming in legally, net migration into the country. And that's been going on for maybe 15, 20 years. Not quite as much as that, but it's gradually increased over the years. Maybe it was tens of thousands. And then the Conservative government has continually said, we're going to crack down, we're going to crack down, we're going to crack down. And each year it's got more and more and more people. So they have to create the illegal migrants in order to distract people from this, maybe 5 to 7 million people coming in over the last maybe 10 years or something. That's creating quite a lot of, interesting dynamics. Yeah, but I don't, as far as I'm aware, no one is actually going anywhere near Rwanda. And I doubt if they ever will, really. But it's a very useful thing for a conservative, in quotes, government who are typically, like I say, traditionally they're anti-immigration. People who are slightly racist or slightly xenophobic vote for them, partly at least, on that basis, that they're voting for an anti-immigration party, when in fact they're not. What they do is completely different to what they say they do. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah. Okay.
My suspicion is that because Rwanda is Tony Blair's created the regime of Paul Kagame, Tony Blair, and on behalf of the City of London, to get to the minerals of Eastern Congo. This is where all the rare earth and the coltan, etc., are in Eastern Congo, and it was Paul Kagame is their creation, and Rwanda is one of the largest recipients of UK aid, 40%. I think it was 40%. And because there has been a change in government in Congo in 2018, President Tshisekedi was elected, and he has, as much as it has been possible, sealed the borders, because these borders were wide open, and horrific amount of low intensity warfare been going on really since 1997. And anyway, Tshisekedi sealed the borders. He put in am I thinking of the word, military, replaced the provincial governments of North Kivu and Ituri and South Kivu as well. And they've sealed there's a constant flow, a constant illegal flow of things like coltan, gold, diamonds, you name it, whatever, going from Eastern Congo to Rwanda. And Tshisekedi has put a stop to that as much as has been possible. So Rwanda is no longer the recipient of all those lucrative things, those lucrative raw materials. And I think it is my suspicion that this entire story of the migration center in Rwanda is a way of funneling support and finances to Kagame, because he acts on behalf of Brussels and the UK and all these stolen minerals that they're not paying taxes to the DRC government. That is what I believe.
Okay. So there's actually, so as I understand it right now, so there's actually no immigrants have been exiled from Great Britain into Rwanda, correct?
As of the moment, no, but it's a processing center that they are starting there. Just remember, Rwanda is one of the smallest countries in Africa. It's a very small country, and it's thousands of kilometers from Britain. Why on earth do it? It makes no sense, start to finish. Absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I was wondering what the connection was between Kagame and the British
it's
government.
Tony Blair, and if you say that to a British person, well, this is, Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and the Tony Blair connection are so interlinked, then it all makes sense.
Okay. All right. So from the chat box, I saw that Gerald had a question regarding costs.
Oh, yes. Yes, that was very good, PD. I especially like the map that you have of Africa showing all the interconnections for the transcontinental railroads. And, coming from Canada, which is 0 kilometers of high-speed rail, lots of studies, but nothing's being built. I wanted to, in my own mind, get an idea of costs. I know, like, how's the OAU, Organization of African Unity, when they came out with that project, I think you said it was 2013. Did they give like a rough estimate, of how much all of this would cost? Because in my mind, I just want to compare it to what we're spending on war today. Like the US Congress just passed a bill for $100 billion. And of course, the Russians will spend money in response in China. But I just wanted to compare that $100 billion to what it would actually cost or what they estimated it would cost to build that network. Do you know offhand?
I don't, Jerry. I really don't, but I'm sure that figure would have financed a large proportion of it.
I think so too. Yes, thanks.
Yes, and think about the additional benefits from the railroads, right? Okay. Instead of when you spend all this money on war materials. It's interesting also, people say, oh, well, but the war benefits us in the United States, right? Because we are producing the war materials. We're sending the money to Ukraine, but then they're sending it back to us because they're buying the war materials from us and we're producing it. And we're like, wow, what a convoluted scheme, okay? And Ukraine is going to be a country with no men anymore. It's just a country of women in the end, right? After a few more years of this, if we don't stop it. Anyway, okay. So Chris had a question. Chris, are you there?
Yeah, thanks. What did I say? So, what do you think about people have said the Middle East might become the new uh, Europe? And I was just thinking when you were talking, I know, it's a much larger scale, but Africa becoming the next United States. But at the same time, there's parallels to the developments at, the turn of the 20th century with the Trans-Siberian railways and Germany agreeing with Turkey, I think, to build a railway. And of course, everyone's drawing parallels to World War One, but it does seem, what you're talking about, that maybe the East is way ahead of the game comparatively. Is that the way it seemed to you? And if so, where would I would think the main problems would be what, Rwanda, which is very small, Burundi, and maybe the Congo above all, or would those, and do you see the forces behind the high-speed railway kind of convening to address those problems? It seems to be headed that direction, but how do you see it? Sorry, that's a multi-part
Well,
question.
the East. I was listening to very interesting interview on Dmitry Orlov talking about. He was on a channel called Dialogue Works, talking about the Russian economy and how Russia's concentration on building up its physical economy has allowed this tremendous economic progress despite the Ukraine war. And that's what they're doing. You see, that's what China's done. It's focused on the physical economy. It's China's network of high-speed rail. And when you talk high-speed rail in China, you're talking phenomenal. You're talking absolutely crazy speeds. And China's huge. And the high-speed railway networks have been designed to traverse the entire country. And I wish I was economically eloquent enough to explain to you why high speed is so important, but it is. It's like I know Matt could jump in there and succinctly explain it, but I'm afraid I can't. But the speed is critical. The speed is critical, not in terms of it takes 4 hours instead of 10. That's not the important thing. The important thing is the efficiency, the minimization. So when you're talking in terms of energy, why nuclear energy is the energy source to go for, it is because it's the most efficient, the most energy dense. You need the smallest amount of it to produce the largest amount of energy. That's what's, and the same concept applied to high speed. So if you can get there in rocket time, this is how you drive a successful economy. Always in that negentropic, constantly going upwards. So getting back to, it's only in the West that we have so many people have opposition to development. That somebody said to me, I was talking to them about the railway, and they said, "Oh, sounds like fourth industrial revolution, oh." And that only makes sense if you live in the West, and you're not living in the Congo, and you don't want to swim with the crocodiles, and you don't want to go and collect wood to make your fire, and you're tired of the kids dying before they're 3, So we have very different ideas of people. You say to most Westerners that word industrialization, and they go woo, and it freaks them out. Really freaks them out, because they think of that the satanic mills. What's that hymn? Jerusalem and the satanic mills. And they think of the evil industrial revolution and the smoke and the pollution and all the stuff that we've been brainwashed with, whilst we sit on our computers with the central heating on and the cooker cooking the food and the washing machine doing the clothes and getting in the EV to drive down the supermarket. But industrialization, it's just totally. I think I've gone off subject. So, did I answer that? You're on mute.
Yeah, no, you answered it. I mean, I don't know if you see any, like, what do you do? I just see we're losing ground. I mean, we're continuing. France continues to lose protectorates or whatever. Just seems to be, things might be snowballing in a good direction. I just don't know if you see any, like Britain and Rwanda. That's always a concern. I don't know, that, like, where would the points of like the U.S. to cause conflict to stall this, or
the Sahel? They're trying their damnedest to. They really are trying so hard, between Macron and France running the terrorism. So you have Burkina Faso, astonishing history of Burkina Faso, and you have a leader there now, President Traoré, who came in with a coup military government, and he has come out openly and accused France of running the terrorism, running the extremists in the Sahel, which is what the West is doing. We know that. Assad of Syria said, you've got extremism and you've got the neoliberal system, and they're two sides of the same coin. So, and he's not alone in saying that. There are more and more people coming out, and the leader of Burkina Faso recently said that. And these 3 countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, have all kicked France right out. No more France in those countries. Wow. So sad. for what France should have been, what it once was, and for the decent people of France, but for their globalist-run government. But these three countries have kicked them out, and now Niger have just kicked out the American forces. Niger was a total puppet state for NATO, for the West, total puppet state running the. This is how the extremists operate. This is how they operate. They are funded and operated by the, what do we call them? The Anglo-American elite, the oligarchy, whatever you want to call them, that entity. So yeah.
And now we're seeing. Sorry, I'm almost all done. But I was just going to say, now we're seeing what ISIS are protesting in Germany, and they were allowed to protest. Did you see that? And I'm just thinking they're trying to. It's not going to work, I don't think, but they're trying to. And I heard like the Germans, they were going to install a caliphate in Germany, while Israel, I don't know, but it's not working out, actually. But there's theories that they were going to try to install a caliphate in Germany, but it doesn't look like it's coming. God forbid that happens, but it doesn't look like it's going to work out. Okay. But anyways, thanks.
Okay.
Right. Anybody else has another question for PD Lawton? Because if not, I would love to hear a second part of your presentation, PD.
Okay.
All right, we're moving on to the second part, the hieroglyphs. Okay.
So, just get that one to come up. There we go. So we have here a fragment of Libyan, it's a piece found in Libya, and very, very well known, the bull palette, it's called, and this sculpture, whatever it was, I chose because, and the picture just disappeared. I don't know why.
So
I'll go back. Here we go.
oh, there it is. Okay.
So I chose this of all the things I could have chosen. I could have chosen actual hieroglyphic pictograms, whatever, but I chose this because it's so bizarre. And if you look at that, it's really, how has this ever been explained? Along with so much of, I don't want to say Egyptian because it's been taken away from Africa, this North African empire that existed, this incredible empire that was. So I chose this because of its utterly bizarre nature. And looking at ancient North African empire, including Egypt, and their entire language has never been comprehensively explained. It is never explained in a way which actually makes sense. So you can look at the translations, for instance, of the Rosetta Stone and all the different symbols, and this means this and this means that, and then you put them together and you get some kind of garbled, scrambled sentence that really has very little logical explanation for what it is. So I have chosen this because it is so utterly bizarre. And at this moment in time, if you went to an Egyptologist, you went to Oxford or Cambridge, and you said to the highest of the academics, what is that depicting? They would probably come out with, I'm not quite sure what. But I know they wouldn't come out with what I'm just about to read to you. So I'm reading to you from a book called Moses and the Hieroglyphs, and it's by Grant Berkeley. It's based on the work of two British historians, which I'll come to in a second. And when I read this to you, it's such a relief. It's such a relief to finally look at something like that and for it to make complete and utter sense. Okay, so this Libyan palette. All that is preserved of the Libyan palette is merely a fragment, which again has a graphic scene carved upon the surface. The picture shows a bearded man being trampled by a bull, and the extraordinary feature which immediately struck Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett, who are the two historians, is that the man is shown as having two left hands. I don't think you can see that, and maybe you can, but if you look at it on your computer screen another time, you will see what they're saying. There are two left hands. As the Welsh word dwi means both two and the ruler, and chwith, another Welsh word, means both left and also wrong, we are simply being informed that this man was the wrong ruler. His two left hands means he's the wrong ruler. Below the fallen man is a right hand holding a rope, which are claw, Welsh word claw, for hand, and rhefflin for rope, and llwon for right. These three short words, llaw, rhefflin, llwon, I can't speak Welsh, so I'm just reading it as best as I can, combine phonetically to produce the abstract word llawrydiaeth, which means bloodshed. Other fragments of this broken palette show that there were in fact 5 hands holding onto the rope, and each hand is attached to a pole that carries a standard or totem animal. Possibly this indicates that the victorious king concerned ruled over 5 districts or cities. Only one hoof of the bull is shown as being cloven, and that is the right foreleg that pins the fallen man's left calf to the ground. A hoof in Welsh is gwadin, and gwadw means to disown or to deny. This probably lingers on in the colloquial hoof 'em out, used to suggest ejecting an undesirable person from a place. So the wrong ruler is clearly being disowned or denied after bloodshed. The calf of the leg is croth, which also means womb, and as it is the man's left calf which is being trodden on, we again have the Welsh word chwith for left and also meaning wrong. This gives us chwith and croth, which is simply the wrong womb. It would appear that the ancient practice of a king having several wives, most of whom were foreign for diplomatic purposes, has caused trouble. The man is being portrayed as a son of the wrong queen, who was not the heiress. The horned bull is again shown as having ash leaves as ears. And as on the Nama palette, this introduces the word on or onan and corn for the bull's horns. This again produces corn plus on, which gives koron, which means crowned. So the bull represents the legitimate king. In ancient Welsh records, great warriors were styled as being bulls of conflict, and Egyptian kings were styled as the mighty bull. There may have been other messages in this scene. For example, the bull is shown with 3 chevrons as eyebrows, and the 3 chevrons were the symbol of Cymric kings in Britain, and the coat of arms of King Istin ap Gwirion, or Justin, son of Aurelian. These are distant echoes. Another word for hoof is khan, which also has the meaning of notorious. To trample as this bull is doing is satru, and combinations of the roots of these 2 words, khan and satru, produce a series of meaningful words. There is 1. Kas is the same as hatred or enmity, and 2. Kasu is to hate or to be disgusted, and 3. Kasad is hating, enmity, and 4. Kaswir is the same as one who hates, and kased, hatred or enmity. I'll stop there. So that explanation of what is actually taking place is something that I don't think people who haven't read that would be able to answer, would be able to see, and for it to have come from the most extraordinary place is what's so interesting. So I'll come to my next slide. So hieroglyphics, anyone can learn it. And if you get Ross Broadstock's book, you can translate hieroglyphics because it's Welsh. So for anyone who doesn't know where Wales is, it's part of Britain. It's on the western board of Britain. So why on earth does the ancient Welsh language of Coolbrin translate hieroglyphics in a way that makes perfect sense of anything written in hieroglyphics? And I'm going to leave it there.
You said something earlier before we started the presentation. You said something about the Welsh language in Parliament in Great Britain.
Yeah.
Can you?
It's the only language that is forbidden in British Parliament is Welsh. So just to say that this Ross Broadstock's book and Moses and the Hieroglyphs, which is really edited by Grant Berkeley, worked with these two historians, Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett, and neither of these people had an academic background. Sadly, really sadly, they're both dead now. Barham, the younger of the two, died last year, really tragic. And he had already had one assassination attempt on his life. They tried to kill Barham to get to Alan because Barham was like Alan's son. Alan Wilson was a civil engineer. He has also died relatively recently. That's understandable. He was in his mid-90s. But these two men have changed the face of history for not just ancient British history and history of the British Isles, but they have redated the entire timeline of Egyptology. I can't even express in words the significance of their work. So they have done it by reading the ancient Welsh manuscripts and by translating hieroglyphics. This can be done using the only language that nobody ever tried. They kept saying it's Coptic. It's what they still say, that Coptic translates is the best translation for hieroglyphics, when in fact the ancient Welsh language of Coolbrin perfectly translates hieroglyphics. And that in itself is the biggest can of worms, as Jerry well knows, that can be opened for academia, for this system, because from the mid-1800s onwards, the establishment, the Anglo-American establishment, well in this case the Anglo establishment, did their level best to destroy any shred of ancient British history of King Arthur the First and King Arthur the Second, and where the British kings, the ancient Welsh kings, actually migrated from, and this incredible story that needs telling. So just astonishing the redating that these two historians have managed to do, and sadly now even Barham is dead, and Ross Broadstock died 2 years ago, aged mid-50s. So yeah, you can come across Ross Broadstock. Has a lot of stuff on YouTube. where he actually teaches. He's a fantastic teacher, and he will teach you to translate your name into hieroglyphics. I mean, it's such fun. But his work is, he's worked with Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett. So that's all I want to say.
Just for clarification purposes, the slide 29 where you had the stone with the balls.
The Libyan palettes.
Yes, okay, that's what I wanted to find out. This is from Libya.
Yeah, Libya. So the name of Libya, Kush was Ethiopia. Punt was ancient Libya, the time of Egypt. Punt.
Okay, very fascinating. Very fascinating. Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us. Is anybody, okay, if you want to stop sharing the screen.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll see if anybody is having questions. Okay. Anybody has any questions for PD Lawton on, oh, Chris is holding up his his real hand. Okay. 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 So Chris, do you wanna okay, have a question?
Yeah, okay,
do you have a question? Yeah?
Yeah, thanks. So what was I listening to yesterday? So this kind of plays into alternative histories. I was listening to something yesterday about there's this theory that there were Moorish Masons in history or in this alternative history that built a lot of these structures around the world, like the pyramids, supposedly some pre-existing structures in the Americas, monuments and such. And they were sort of, I don't know what happened. I know they were sort of giants, and supposedly they were, I don't know what happened, but they were kind of disappeared, starting with the Knights of St. George and the Knights of Malta, and kind of these secret societies that became Freemasonry. And it's a little oddball, but some of the stuff you're saying kind of jives with what I was listening to yesterday. What do you think of that?
I'd say what you're talking about is there's so many theories out there, and one of the things that I so deeply appreciate about Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett's work is that it's based on fact, because you can go to Culbran, you can go to the ancient Welsh language and translate hieroglyphics perfectly, and that is not speculation or conspiracy. It's a fact. That's what I love.
Thank you, Chris. Gerald had a comment, and then after Gerald, Stephen Doyle.
Actually, I have two comments now, but
okay, go ahead.
PD, I'd forgotten all about it, but when I was doing my research on my presentation on King Arthur, I did read Wilson and Blackett, some of their work on that, because I was interested in Geoffrey of Monmouth's history, where he says that the Stonehenge and similar astronomical observation sites, particularly in Ireland, he said they came from Africa. So I ended up reading some of the work of Wilson and Blackett on that, which really helped strengthen my my conclusion on that connection. There is a connection to it.
Yeah.
So I had forgotten the names until you mentioned it. Thank you very much for that. And Chris, your discussion of the Moors, this is a project that's going on with me and some other people, because if you look at, we call it the Islamic Renaissance, and the Moors in Spain at that time, 8th century, 9th century, 10th century. You can see the similarities of their architecture from the Moor kingdom in Spain and what later was brought into France under Charlemagne. The myth, or the way it's obstructed today, is they call it Gothic cathedrals, Gothic architecture. There's no such thing. The Goths were Germans. They didn't really build this stuff. They were Vikings. But the so-called Gothic cathedral should be referred to as Charlemagnian cathedrals. And you can, if you do a study, I did one. If you look at, before then, the windows were round. And after that, you see they come to a point. And that comes from the Moors. That comes from Islamic culture. And this connection between the Islamic culture coming into Europe at that time has been covered up. And so they call it Gothic, saying it must have come from these Viking barbarians. But I just wanted to make that point with you because there's a big fight about it, and maybe more will come out of that. But you're correct in thinking that. I just wanted to say it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Stephen, you have something to say? You have a question?
Yes. PD, first of all, love the lecture. Thank you very much for giving it. The second part was especially interesting for me because I kind of have an interest in that general field of alternative views of high antiquity, for lack of a better term. And I actually gave a lecture a couple of years ago on Charles Hapgood's Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings book.
Saw that.
So,
Yeah.
but in terms of the Welsh and the UK and the I'll say hypothetical ancient ties to the Middle East and or Egypt, Africa, are you familiar with works that tie in that the Book of Enoch might speak to that as well as the Kolbrin, or that the megalithic sites within the UK tied to the English system of measure and all sorts of fascinating things? Have you ever encountered that sort of stuff in your reading?
I was just listening today to Femi, because you say that surname, because Femi's lectures. Just started listening to those, and that was just fascinating. So to sort of recap, I think we've been looking at something through completely the wrong prism, haven't we? So once we can, I wanted to say that, the prism we've been looking through is, I would say, the Freemasonic element, because we're now looking at the modern crusade on Jerusalem, and these are the modern crusaders who are doing it. So the way I'm thinking at the moment is that we are seeing history, we're being funneled through a Freemasonic prism, and that once we learn to expand our understandings, that it will all start to make sense. And one of the things that I found so intriguing, because I listened to your Hapgood lecture, and that's just so incredibly interesting. And I think that book is one of the key books in unraveling to take away the veils of our history. And right at some point in Hapgood's book, and you brought it up, was this map they found in China, and the cartography that it took. And when I say cartography, I don't mean the outline of a country. I mean, how do you draw a circle? How that kind of cartography of where do you take your central point, that whole incredibly intrinsic mathematical principle of cartography to design a map. And that map they found on a stone, engraved on a stone in China, was using a system of cartography more advanced than what we have today with satellites. So, and I think I've gone off subject again, but the megaliths, you know, it's astrotheology. So that whole civilization or civilizations were living according to the planets and the stars. But that is actually what Freemasonry is. Freemasonry is astrotheology, and it's astrotheology of the effect of the planets. And you saying about Enoch, and I was just trying to recall something, but I did read a very interesting book by, I think he's called Robert Lomas, on Freemasonry. He's actually a Freemason and was writing about Freemasonry and the origins of it. And it's actually very interesting because that's what it is. It's the influence of the planets on our psyches, on our psyches, on the creation of geniuses, on the creation of people who come across in history like Christ, who have this ability because they're born under a certain star to change things, and that being born under a certain star is the astronomy of what it takes to create this revolutionary psyche within human beings who are receptive to it. So those things like Stonehenge, the megaliths, these are the study of the stars and the study of the planets, and really this is all connected. And you know, I have a book. It's the most bizarre thing. The I can never say the word Mabinogi, and it's these bizarre little stories. They're really, really strange, which are so ancient no one knows where they come from. And Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett write about this in one of their books. And there's the one particular story is of King Arthur. And they explain that King Arthur is our solar system. So in the story, King Arthur's court is the solar system. And this bizarre little story goes on about a knight who goes around beating up whoever he comes across. But he's accompanied by this poor woman called Enid, who keeps getting beaten up. And what it is, as Alan Wilson explained, was Mars, when Mars was out of orbit and going around knocking into other planets, causing absolute havoc in our galaxy. And the Enid is the satellite, the moon of Mars, one of the moons of Mars. So this ancient bizarre little story is about when Mars was out of orbit. So it's all so fascinating, but it's once we get ourselves out of the prism that we've been directed in, it certainly changes everything.
Yeah, it is fascinating, and you know, you allude to the school of thought that thinks that some of these ancient myths can be interpreted metaphorically, that they encode astronomical knowledge possibly, or other events history. I know you could, my own opinion is you could take Hamlet's Mill, that book, and take that kind of proto myth that it alludes to and interpret it similarly. So I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I just want to bring that up and say how much I found that aspect of your presentation really interesting. I have a couple of ideas for books that maybe through Matt and Cynthia, I'll just share some ideas with you if you'd like. And certainly if you have some more books that I might not have read, I'd certainly welcome that list too.
Great, we'll do that through them and get in touch on those. Yeah.
Okay, super, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Is there anybody else who has a question or a comment for PD Lawton? Okay. It doesn't. Oh, Kelly. Kelly has a question. Hello, Kelly. You're on mute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Ah, yes, there you are.
How you doing? Have you heard about you're talking about all the Egyptian hieroglyphs and things like that. Have you heard of ogamic writing or something like that? It's called Ogam, Ogam or Ogham. It was it was like it's almost like a code writing that they found in Ireland, um, and they deciphered the monks used to use it, and they trace it back to like Phoenician writing or North African. Have you ever heard anything about that?
I can't, that is not ringing a bell. Organ is not ringing a bell with me. But I'm racking my brain because somewhere I've got a book about a North African language that is super interesting. But my brain's a bit tired and I can't remember.
Yeah, this language, it was supposedly used by Phoenician or North African sailing people, and they went like they were some of the ones that may have went up to Ireland and maybe even like with the Welsh and all that. Yeah, it was like a stick writing, like there would be a line and then
yeah, I know what you mean now. Yeah, I do know what you mean. Like runes.
something like that. Yeah,
like runes,
but it actually they could decipher it and everything else. And apparently, they've even found some of these writings in the east coast of North America with some of the Indian tribes.
That's interesting.
Which I don't know. I find that kind of like something to look into.
Definitely. I mean, there's so much evidence, and more comes each day that that civilization that predated ours was they're incredible seafarers. I mean, just phenomenal seafarers in terms of navigating the world, navigating the globe, and their navigation skills. So, Christopher Columbus, get on, it's done so many times before you talk, it's boring, isn't it? Christopher Columbus, so boring. There's so many people before him, and they didn't go and rape and plunder and kill and slaughter everyone that they came across. So
yeah.
Yeah.
There was I think it's called the Book of Ballymote. It's an Irish book.
Okay.
This Ogam writing is actually found in that book.
Book of Ballymote.
Yeah.
All right. Write that down. Thanks.
Do you have it there, Kelly, so you can hold it up? Or?
Yeah.
Well, no. I have I have a book. It's called America BC. It was all about travel from like people who had visited North America, or so they claim. And they go back to like the Egyptians, the Vikings, and like all the pre-Columbian stuff. And I don't know how. Yeah. Yeah, like you have your legends of Saint Brendan and all that kind of stuff. And all that's pretty shrouded in mystery, but they do have these writings. Like I don't know how far it's been investigated, but they have found stuff in North America. There's a tribe in I think New Brunswick, the Micmac Indians. They even had in their language, and they proved that they're they said one of the priests that came over taught the Indians a language, but it turned out like this priest, he couldn't have taught the language because they didn't even have it deciphered yet, this ancient Egyptian, until the Rosetta Stone was this, was deciphered, and the Rosetta Stone didn't come out till like 50 to 100 years after um, this Jesuit priest supposedly taught the Indians. So that was kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, supposedly deciphered the Rosetta Stone, but there's a book that I bought fairly recently that goes into, Quetzalcoatl, the snake of South American cultures, Central and South American cultures, Quetzalcoatl, that the African origins of this.
Quetzalcoatl.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And going into the African origins of this, so that, and I think that would be coming back to, I didn't realize he said the word Moorish, the first question, and the transatlantic voyages that were made between Africa and America. So yeah, all comes into it, and how this was all possibly once we lived under a much more shared culture than we've ever been led to believe.
Yeah, there's a lot to look into. I just have another question that's maybe already explained it in the beginning, but the Rosetta Stone, I always thought that was already solved, like that we already translated everything, and now you're saying that the real translation is in Welsh.
Yeah, it's the only language they didn't try.
But I thought they already did it with this Coptic. Like I thought it was already, they could already decipher everything.
You get a much better translation with Kulbrin, one that makes sense. Yeah,
all
one
right.
that makes sense.
Okay, that clarifies my. Thanks.
Petey, do you? I realize you're in Europe, and that means you're 6 hours ahead of us. It's 10 o'clock for you, I guess. Okay. Do you have still time for one more question or
Yes,
not?
of course.
Yes?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's 5 hours. Yeah.
Is it 5 hours? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Chris, you had another question.
Yeah, just it's not really a question, just well, it's sort of a question. So in 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Empire, and that was thought to be a good thing for the East because there is a Silk Road, but yet, in consequence, you mentioned Columbus, and that's why it got me mentioning this, because Columbus, I mean, as a consequence, Europe colonized the Americas. The trade routes, and by the 19th century, or the turn of the 20th century, or late 1800s, Ottoman Empire was the sick man of Eastern Europe, I guess, or Europe, sort of Europe. They were going down. Well, I just think there's some parallels as to what's going on now, 500 and some years later. But so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's it.
Yeah, I can't think of anything eloquent to say about it other than we've been living with the Malthusian mindset, this entity for such a long time, and going back to Matt's work, Matt and Cynthia's work of this, the British Empire and the origins and the Venetian bankers. And we've been living with this for such a long time, and I think that they have gone to such extremes to obscure so much knowledge that now they are receding, and that's why the world is in such chaos, because their empire is dying. So we can look forward to a great time of enlightenment, real enlightenment.
I think you absolutely have a point in this, because for so long we have been okay, fed the narrative through the way the oligarchy, for lack of a better word right now, okay, wants us to believe. And I think with the opening up and more people questioning the narrative more and more, a lot more ideas and research is being done. And we're now finding out all kinds of things that, you know,
Yeah,
contradictory to the so-called textbooks, yes?
yes, and you know the element which I find so interesting, and Femi's lectures really bring that in, that the marriage between mathematics, the marriage between a physical principle and something which we tend to only think of as esoteric. So the horns of the bull, the horns of the devil, symbolized by horns, and those horns are Taurus, the constellation of Taurus, and then into that you bring in the concept of resonance. So you have the tuning forks, and you have resonance that is set up by polarities, and those polarities are that phrase, opposition, the opposites, the coincidence of opposites, that resonance. So all of these esoteric thoughts eventually marry into something which is a physical scientific principle. And we're starting to find this out more and more. Something Femi was talking about, the 101010, the binary way we live. You do this or you do that. You make that choice, or you make the other choice, and this whole notion of duality. I think that is going to happen more and more, that we are capable of understanding the scientific principle behind what we have up until now only considered an esoteric thought.
Thanks, PD. Jerry, you wanted to give a comment on one of the things? Yes.
I just have to add some. I'm a great fan of Christopher Columbus, so when I have to say something about him, but I just wanted to point out to people that if you read Columbus's story, you'll find that on his third trip to America, while he was here, the Spanish sent a flotilla to the New World, arrested him, put him in chains, dragged him back to Spain, and threw him in prison.
Wow.
And from that point on, there was a change in the policy of the Spanish government. After that point, Spanish feudalism was brought to America. After that point, slavery was then allowed in the New World. So I won't say any more, but I like Columbus. But you have to look at the change that took place, the families who then took over the Spanish monarchy and actually did commit the genocide that we know in Americas, but it wasn't Columbus. I got to defend my buddy. Sorry.
Well, that's really interesting and news to me. My apologies, Jerry.
No, it's another one of these history stories that are what do they call it? It's not talked about.
Massaged.
Yeah. But yes.
Was it Princess Isabella, or was it a whole family? I mean, I guess it would be a whole family, but was it her family?
No, it's the Habsburgs. You have to look at the Habsburg takeover of Spain and before that, but I don't want to get off on the subject. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in. Sorry about that, PD.
No, that's very interesting, and the Habsburgs make sense. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think we had some very interesting different segues, different paths here coming from this presentation. I want to thank you very much, PD, because this picture of Africa and the high-speed railroads, it gives so much optimism and hope for this continent, which, I grew up from when I was little. We always talked about Africa as being like a lost cause, right? And of course, we never even, when I was little, we never even got told why what was happening in Africa was happening. Okay. It was always this idea of, oh yeah, they're just mismanaged. They're mismanaged. Okay. Their governments are not adept and so forth, right?
And of course, sorry to cut you there, Magdalena. Yeah. Of course, your research into South Africa and the Milner groups and the road circles, and it all starts to make sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And when you have done that, yes, after I done that research, I knew some of it before already. Okay, but then that became so clear, right? How this oligarchical force, this thinking, okay, of how humans can be viewed at, right? You have on one side, you have this idea that every human being is precious and needs to be cherished. And then on the other hand, you have people who think, oh, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. People are like, you can treat them like animals, and they don't give a hoot about how people live and how people die and how people prosper or they don't prosper, right? So that's but I'm so happy, as I said, of seeing this plans for development for Africa. So I wanted to thank you so much for your presentation, and we hope to see you soon again.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks to everyone who set the course and listened. Thanks.
Yes. All right. Goodbye, everybody, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Bye. Thank you, PD.
Cheers.
Thanks all.
Thanks, PD.
Thanks, Jerry.